Drew here, and season 2, episode 5 of Raised by Wolves finds this series at its weirdest and best. I have a lot of shows where I'm always like, oh, I feel really, really good about my wife, Jordan, walking into the room while I'm watching this because she'll be like, oh, my husband is so sophisticated and whatnot. But with this show, not that it doesn't show how sophisticated I am for watching it, it totally does. But it's just one of those things that without the proper context, it just can come off as very, very strange and off-putting. And this episode was this show at its most of that. So I was kind of glad she didn't walk in while I was watching this episode. Last week, so much happened. It kind of felt like a season finale, as I said in my last review. So I kind of expected this to be kind of a slowing of the pacing. I expected the foot to come off the accelerator somewhat. It didn't happen at all. If anything, they goosed it because this episode, I feel like, was even more eventful than last episode. And once again, there were a lot of things that I didn't expect to happen, some for good, some for ill. But overall, I feel like this is probably the strongest episode of the season yet, and I thought that last week as well. So, they've managed to top themselves for me. But I think the highlight of this episode was clearly the moment when Vril returns to get her revenge on those who have, left her with this skull-like face. And it was, they were definitely playing up the horror elements here as she hunts down the members of the group one at a time, and hell hath no fury, like androids scorned. Definitely a horrifying and frightening sequence, but I had a few things about it that I would quibble with. First, they made it pretty obvious early on that Holly had plot armor. When, Vril was able to gun down people without hardly looking most of the time, and then she would miss when shooting at Holly, you kind of know that they've just decided that for whatever reason, the very, very important character of Holly is safe and that she can't be killed by Vril during this sequence. I also felt that this seemed like a haphazard way to end Marcus's flock. I always felt that they were leading up to the flock being all killed off because I feel like it was pretty obvious they're showing that Marcus is a false prophet who can't protect his people. Made sense to me. But the way that this happened, like I said, it felt haphazard. I feel that if they had in some way showed the flock putting their trust in Marcus to protect them more and then shown them being obliterated, that might have accomplished more than this sequence the way that it did manage to accomplish. Because, it was just a random android coming back for revenge, and that could have happened to anyone in this show. But if it had been a sequence such as the one in an early episode where one of Marcus's followers jumps under a tank to please Marcus, to accomplish this mission for Marcus, if it had been a sequence like that and then this tank runs over him and kills him, that would be more what I think would have shown the themes that they were going for here. But that's, again, these are quibbles. Overall, the sequence was, it accomplished a lot, and I was really surprised to see this happen so early. I thought Marcus would have his flock with him far into the season, far farther than this anyway. I liked the end of Decima's arc, that she went from being someone who, was kind of betraying her faith to treat this android as a daughter, to being someone who kind of betrayed her daughter for the sake of her faith, to just the bitterness you can see in her this episode. She seems to have really come to realize that Marcus is a false prophet and that he has no power, and just realizing that she betrayed this daughter figure for him under those circumstances. I think it's just a lot for her to take in. And, why she continues with Marcus, why she doesn't immediately enact some kind of revenge on him, not really sure. But, you just see the bitterness there. And this final moment between her and Vril where, at one level she's afraid for her life, but at another level I feel like she really, really wanted to make restitution, that she felt some level of guilt for what she did to Vril, but that Vril, is having none of it, that the pain that she's been put through both being rejected by her mother figure, and also by, just being damaged so brutally that it's too much, and she reenacts this revenge that's just horrific of peeling back her mother figure's face in the same way that her own face has been peeled back. Now, I do have to say, I feel like the writers are cheating a little bit in that androids basically seem to be able to sustain severe injuries on an episode basis and then no consequences later. And, I feel like they put in more effort to explain the recoveries in earlier episodes. Now it's just like, okay, Vril gets her face slashed up and then jumps off a huge cliff that you would think would damage her internal systems substantially so that she would need someone to repair her before she could be back in action. We've seen her get damaged in earlier episodes. Her leg got damaged in a previous episode. But this episode, she's just back in action and an unstoppable, violent force. And no one seemingly repaired her. She's just back and killing everyone. So to me, I feel like that could have used a little bit more explanation. I feel like the writers were kind of being lazy with that one. Otherwise, this episode, I thought it was really a big revelation what Marcus found down in this pit during his trial, that he discovered this devolved alien species. If you watch the video that they show after the episode where the show's creators talk about this episode, they say that it is a devolved human. It's an intermediary species between the humans and these creatures that have been coming out of the pits. So I don't know if they meant to reveal that in the after special, but it makes sense. I'm sure that's what's going on now. And, that leads to a lot of questions. A lot of you had theorized, hey, maybe these things aren't just creatures. Maybe we shouldn't be, violently killing them all the time. And this seems to confirm that. It also seems to confirm that the human characters, as this series goes on, may become more alien, that they may evolve to adapt to this planet and to the environment. We'll have to wait and see. Obviously, this episode we see Paul about to seemingly evolve into a serpent like Seven, and he gets saved from that fate by Sue. But you have to wonder if there's going to be like intermediary characters. Obviously, I think the actors aren't going to want to look completely like aliens, so they're probably going to have humans with weird prosthetics and such. But we'll have to wait and see if they take this in that direction. But this has a lot of interesting implications, and I think it was one of the more interesting revelations to come out of this episode. The moment when Marcus ends up not getting killed after Father and Lucius take him prisoner, I feel that it seems obvious that he has plot armor as well as Holly. And I'm a little frustrated with that because I feel like it causes the audience to lose a little bit of our suspension of disbelief. But, I get it. They have plans for Marcus. I suspect that what's going on is he's going to make some major discovery at the end of the season, and it's just about him getting to that point, and everyone who's with him doesn't really matter except as an asset or as an obstacle to him getting to this discovery. And it's probably going to have something to do with the city that he wants to usher in. My operating theory at this point, based on what happened to Sue this episode, that, she is not someone who has faith, but she prayed to whatever this species is, whatever it is that's sending out the signal, and they sent her a vision of how to heal Paul, and, she goes, carries that out, and at the end of this episode, she's being told to plant this seed. My theory is that this is going to resurrect some dormant alien civilization, and that whatever is sending out this signal needs the people that are out there on the surface to take action for this to happen. And someone at the end of this season is going to probably cause this civilization to resurrect. I think that it's using the characters to accomplish this purpose, and it doesn't care about them as individuals at all. And all the prophecies seem designed to help bring this civilization back from dormancy. So to me, I think that clearly this is an example of religion being used to manipulate people for its own end. But something we see constantly this season is people that had faith losing their faith. You see this episode with Reaver, where he's starting to lose faith in his God of a sort, the trust, in that he realizes he's been programmed by it and it has taken away his real identity in order to make him more useful to it. You see it with numerous other characters, but you see it particularly this episode with Sue, as she's coming to like grasp that there is some force at play. And the ultimate question that gets asked by Paul at the end of this episode: what's the difference between an alien and a god? I guess we'll have to wait and see what the creators think the difference is, if they think there is a difference. But this episode for Sue is a big episode. She gets a lot more to do than she has in previous episodes this season. There's a lot of body horror with the slugs and these visions that she's having. I feel that one of the more interesting discussions this episode was her discussion with Mother about the fact that Paul was transitioning into this other life form, into this serpent. And obviously Mother has her own child that is a serpent, Seven. But on another note, I think because she's an android, she doesn't grasp that, humanity is something to be clung to, and that there's any difference between transitioning into different life forms. To her, it's all the same. And, someone could argue that she's not wrong. I personally think she is. But, that she doesn't grasp why Paul transitioning into a serpent would be such a bad thing. I mean, it's him becoming a life form that has a better chance of survival on this planet, is it not? So it's really interesting, this discussion. But, again, they wanted to give something for Sue to do this episode, and I suspect that led them to have her go on this quest with Campion to steal these slugs off the back of this, I guess you could call it a devolved human. I'm not sure if we should be calling them aliens anymore, that comes out of the acid water. I feel that they've really depowered these aliens this season. Marcus really easily shoots the one in the pit after it devolves from, sort of this intermediary state between being a human and being these creatures. It dies really easily, and this one gets knocked out really easily with the gas. They just don't seem very threatening anymore. It seems like they only are threatening when the writers want them to be. So again, I get it. This was kind of an interesting quest for Sue to go on to save her adopted son. It was reconciling the two up till this point. Ever since last season when he tried to kill her, and he hasn't been willing to forgive her because of her lack of faith, even though he was willing to forgive Marcus. So I get that this was accomplishing all that, but it feels like they would have sent Mother on this mission. It would have been a lot easier for her to pull this off. I guess you don't know that she would want to do it, given that she doesn't seem to recognize how bad it would be for him to get turned into a creature like Seven. But at the same time, I feel like she could have been persuaded and gone on this mission at Campion's behest, and it would have been a lot less dangerous for her. Sue yelling in this creature's face, it just seems like it would have been a lot easier for her to pull this off than for Sue, but they wanted something for this character to do, I guess. But otherwise, this episode, they're kind of putting a pin in the plot line involving the character that you guys have nicknamed Grandmother. She's clearly there. She clearly is going to be a contributor to the story by the end of the season. But this ancient android, we don't really know much about her yet, except that she doesn't really seem able to talk, but that Father seems once more to be very, very drawn to her. So what they're going to do with that, not really sure. It is interesting that there's something going on with Tempest's baby, it seems. She starts, her heartbeat gets elevated when she's around Paul right after he's been healed. And I suspect this means that there's something going on with Paul. Perhaps he's going to have some abilities left over from, his adaptational period where he was going to turn into a serpent. Maybe he's going to have some special powers. It'll be interesting to see. So those are my thoughts on this episode. I think this was the strongest episode of the season yet. Possibly one of the most interesting episodes of the show overall. But I don't know that I would personally say it was the best episode. But let me know what you thought in the comments. Let me know your theories and which episodes you thought were the most exciting episodes of the show. If you're interested in seeing my upcoming reviews of Raised by Wolves and other shows, please consider subscribing to the channel. And as always, thanks for watching.